No relative visited the millionaire in the hospital until a beggar wiped his tears. Richard Thompson woke up in the private room of Mercy General Hospital with the feeling that the world had collapsed on him. The 45-year-old businessman had just undergone emergency heart surgery and expected to see at least one familiar face when he opened his eyes. But there he was, alone between four white walls, with only the constant sound of machines monitoring his heartbeat. 3 days had passed since the operation, and none of his 3 brothers had shown up at the hospital. "Doctor, my family, do they know I'm here?" Richard asked the physician making his morning rounds. "Mr. Thompson, your secretary was informed about the surgery. I assume she passed the information along to your relatives," replied Dr. Williams, checking the IV. Richard felt a tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with the surgery. Sharon, his secretary of 15 years, hadn't come either. The woman he considered almost a daughter had simply vanished when he needed her most. The phone beside the bed rang for the first time in 3 days. Richard answered with hope. "Richard? It's Sharon. How are you feeling?" "Sharon, thank God you called. Where is everyone? Where are my brothers?" "Listen, Richard, I need you to sign some urgent papers for the company. Can I stop by tomorrow? And about the office safes, can you give me the combination? There are some payments that can't be delayed." Richard fell silent for a few seconds. She hadn't even asked how his recovery was going. "Sharon, I just had heart surgery. Aren't any of you worried about me?" "Of course we are, Richard. But business can't stop, right? The company has to keep running." The call ended with some excuse about an important meeting. Richard hung up the phone, and for the first time in years, tears began to stream down his face. That's when he felt a presence near the window. A man around 60 years old, dressed in simple, worn clothes, was cleaning the glass from the outside. The man had graying hair and a face weathered by time, but his eyes held a kindness Richard hadn't seen in a long while. The man noticed Richard crying and stopped cleaning. For a moment, they just looked at each other through the window. Then the stranger made a subtle gesture, as if asking if Richard was okay. Richard shook his head, and the tears flowed again. To his surprise, the man put away his cleaning supplies, and a few minutes later, there was a soft knock on the door. "Excuse me, sir. I'm Anthony. I clean the windows here at the hospital. I saw you crying and, well, I brought this." He held out a clean, damp cloth. "You shouldn't be in here," Richard murmured, still wiping his tears. "You're right, I shouldn't," Anthony agreed, stepping closer to the bed. "But sometimes we do what we shouldn't because it's the right thing to do." Anthony handed the cloth to Richard, who hesitated before taking it. The fabric was warm and smelled of coconut soap, a scent that brought back distant memories of Richard's childhood. "Thank you," Richard said, drying his face. "You're welcome, sir. May I ask what happened? Sometimes talking helps." Richard looked at this simple man he'd just met and, without knowing why, felt the urge to pour his heart out. "My name is Richard Thompson. I have 3 brothers and a secretary who's worked with me for 15 years. I just had heart surgery, and not one of them has come to see me. The only call I got was from my secretary asking about company papers." Anthony pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. "This must hurt more than the surgery," Anthony remarked. "Exactly. I built a company from scratch, employed my brothers, gave them all a good life, and now when I need them, they've vanished." "Do you have a family of your own? A wife? Kids?" "No. I always thought I didn't have time for that. The company always came first. My brothers and Sharon were my family." Anthony nodded understandingly. "You know, Mr. Thompson, sometimes we think we know people, but we only find out who they really are when we need them. Do you have family, Anthony?" "I did," the older man replied with a melancholic smile. "But that's a story for another day. What matters now is your recovery. Why did you stop to help me? You don't even know me." "I do. I recognize that look of someone who feels abandoned by the world. I've been there." A nurse entered the room and was surprised to see Anthony there. "Sir, you can't be here. Only family and authorized visitors are allowed." "Let him stay," Richard said firmly. "He's a family friend." The nurse eyed them suspiciously, but left without another word. "Thank you for that," Anthony said. Thank you for stopping to help me. Can I come back tomorrow? I mean, if you'd like company. Richard nodded. For the first time in days, he felt a little relief in his chest. The next day, Anthony showed up at the hospital during lunchtime. He brought a simple packed meal and offered to share it with Richard. I can't eat that, Anthony. I'm on a strict post-surgery diet. Oh, right, sorry, I didn't think of that. But stay here with me, keep me company. As Anthony ate, Richard studied him. There was something about his demeanor, the way he carried himself, that didn't match the job of a window cleaner. Anthony, can I ask you something? Of course. Have you always worked cleaning windows? Anthony chewed slowly before answering. No, Mr. Thompson. I've done many things in life, but some things happened that made me rethink my priorities. What kind of things? Let's just say I also trusted the wrong people once. That afternoon, Sharon finally appeared at the hospital. She arrived carrying a folder full of documents and barely greeted Richard before spreading papers on the bedside table. Richard, I urgently need you to sign these contracts. Some suppliers are pressuring us and, Sharon, I just had heart surgery. Don't you want to know how I am? Of course I do, but you're fine, right? The doctors said the surgery was a success. Now I need you to focus on what's important. Richard looked at the papers. They were authorizations for company bank transfers, some transactions he didn't recognize, and contracts with suppliers he'd never seen. Sharon, what are these contracts? They're the suppliers I mentioned. You need to sign today, or we'll lose some important deals. Why aren't my brothers handling this? They're partners in the company. They're busy with other things. That's why I'm here taking care of everything for you. Richard was about to sign when Anthony walked in. Sharon eyed him warily. Who is this man? This is Anthony, a friend. Richard, you can't just have anyone in here. It's dangerous. Anthony stepped forward politely. Excuse me, ma'am, I don't mean to intrude. I can wait outside. No need to leave, Anthony, Richard said. Sharon lowered her voice. Richard, you can't trust strangers right now. You're vulnerable. This could be dangerous. Anthony, who was close enough to hear, spoke up. Mr. Richard, may I take a look at those papers? I know a thing or two about contracts. Sharon visibly tensed up. This is none of his business, Richard. Let him see, Sharon. 2 heads are better than 1. Anthony took the documents and began reading carefully. His expression gradually changed. Mr. Richard, these contracts, there are some odd things here. Like what? These bank authorizations give power to access all the company accounts, and these suppliers, some of them don't even have active tax IDs. Sharon stood up abruptly. That's ridiculous. This man doesn't know what he's talking about. Richard, are you going to trust a stranger or me who's worked with you for 15 years? Richard looked at Anthony, then at Sharon. Something about her nervousness felt off. Sharon, can you explain these contracts to me? Richard, I don't have time for this. Either you sign now or the company will face serious problems. Then I'll call my brothers and ask their opinion about these contracts. Sharon turned pale. They're in important meetings. They won't be able to answer. Since when do my brothers take meetings I can't interrupt? Richard picked up the phone and dialed Andrew, his oldest brother. To his surprise, the phone was off. He tried calling Mark, the middle brother, also off. Finally, he tried reaching Charles, the youngest. Same result. How strange. All their phones are off. Sharon quickly gathered the papers into her folder. Look, Richard, I'll come back tomorrow when you're more willing to handle these important matters. She hurried out of the room, leaving Richard puzzled. Anthony, do you really understand contracts? I do, Mr. Richard, and I can tell you there were a lot of suspicious things in those papers. How do you know so much about this? Anthony took a deep breath. Because I used to be a businessman, Mr. Richard, and I've been in a situation like yours before. Richard fell silent, processing the information. You were a businessman? For over 20 years. I had a construction company that once employed more than 300 people. What happened? The same problems you're facing now. Family who vanished when things got tough, people I trusted trying to take advantage. But how did you end up washing windows? Anthony finished. Well, that's a long story, but the short version is I lost everything because I trusted the wrong people. Richard felt a chill. Was he going through the same thing? Anthony, do you think my secretary is trying to deceive me? I can't say for sure, Mr. Richard, but I can tell you those contracts had many irregularities. If you'd like, I can discreetly look into those suppliers she mentioned. You'd do that? Of course, it's the least I can do for someone who treated me kindly when everyone else ignores me. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. Anthony's words echoed in his mind. Was it possible that Sharon, after 15 years of working together, was trying to take advantage of him? The next morning, Anthony returned to the hospital with troubling news. Mr. Richard, I found some information about those suppliers. And? 3 of the 5 contracts were with companies that don't exist. Their tax IDs were cancelled years ago. Richard's heart raced. Are you sure? Absolutely. And more. I discovered Sharon met with your brothers yesterday. How did you find that out? I still have some old contacts who helped me when needed. They met at the office of a corporate lawyer. Richard was silent for several minutes. Anthony, I need a favor. Name it. Can you try to find out what my brothers are planning? I can try. But Mr. Richard, prepare yourself for the possibility of hearing things you won't like. I need to know the truth. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 2 days later, Anthony returned with information that left Richard devastated. Mr. Richard, I need to tell you some things, but promise me you'll stay calm. Go ahead. Your brothers are trying to get you legally declared incompetent, claiming you're mentally unfit to run the company. Richard turned pale. Incompetent? But I just had heart surgery. My mind is perfectly fine. I know, Mr. Richard, but they got a fake medical report saying you suffered neurological damage during the surgery. That's impossible. My doctor said everything went perfectly. The report isn't from your doctor. It's from a neurologist they hired who never examined you. Richard struggled to get out of bed, feeling a mix of anger and despair. Is Sharon involved in this? She's coordinating the whole process. The contracts she brought were to transfer control of the bank accounts to her, while the incompetency case proceeds. My God, 15 years working with me and she... Richard couldn't finish the sentence. He began to cry, but these weren't tears of abandonment. They were tears of betrayal. Anthony stepped closer and placed a hand on Richard's shoulder. Mr. Richard, I know this hurts deeply, but we need to act fast. If they get the incompetency ruling, it'll be very hard to reverse. But what can I do? I'm in a hospital recovering from surgery. First, we need a real medical report on your mental state. Second, we need to protect your assets before they gain access. How do you know so much about these legal matters? Anthony took a deep breath. Because I've been through it myself, Mr. Richard. My own family tried the same thing with me. What happened? I had no one to warn me in time. They got everything they wanted. Richard looked at Anthony with gratitude. Why are you helping me? You barely know me. Because I know what it's like to be betrayed by the people we love most, and because I see in you a chance to spare someone else from what I went through. Anthony, I need a lawyer I can trust. I have a contact. He's an honorable man who helped me when I lost everything. He can come here today. A few hours later, Dr. Gerald Foster, a lawyer in his 50s, was in Richard's room listening to the situation. Mr. Thompson, your situation is serious but not impossible to fix, the lawyer said after reviewing the documents Anthony had gathered. First, we'll need a psychiatric evaluation confirming your full mental capacity. I can get that today from my doctor. Perfect. Second, we'll file a preventive motion to block any unauthorized transactions in the company accounts. How long will that take? If we act today, I can get an injunction by this week. Richard turned to Anthony. How much will all this cost? Don't worry about money now, Mr. Richard. The priority is protecting your assets first. Dr. Foster interjected. Mr. Thompson, based on what Anthony told me about your situation, I'll handle this pro bono. Consider it my way of repaying the help he once gave me. Richard looked at both men. In just a few days, Two complete strangers were doing more for him than the family he'd supported for years. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need for thanks yet," Anthony said. "Let's fix this first, then we'll talk." That afternoon, Dr. Williams, the cardiologist in charge of Richard, conducted a full evaluation of his mental functions. "Mr. Thompson, I can categorically state that the heart surgery did not affect your cognitive abilities in any way. You are in full mental capacity." "Doctor, I need this officially documented." "No problem. I'll prepare a detailed report today." While they waited for the medical report, Sharon appeared at the hospital again. This time she was accompanied by Andrew, Richard's older brother. "Richard, how are you?" Andrew said with forced enthusiasm. "Now you show up, Andrew? After a whole week?" "I'm sorry, brother. I've been handling some company matters. You know how it is. Someone had to keep things running while you recovered." Anthony was in the room when they arrived. Andrew looked at him suspiciously. "Who is this man?" "It's Anthony, a friend." "Richard, you can't just let anyone in here. Just let..." "Sharon told me a stranger has been interfering with the company's business." Richard looked straight at Sharon. "Interfering how, Sharon?" "He was questioning the contracts I brought for you to sign. That's very suspicious." "What's suspicious is bringing contracts with shell companies for me to sign," Richard shot back. Andrew and Sharon exchanged a nervous glance. "Richard, what are you talking about?" Andrew asked. "I'm talking about the guardianship petition you're filing against me." The room fell completely silent. Andrew turned red and Sharon went pale. "Who told you that?" Andrew demanded. "Does it matter? What matters is whether it's true." Andrew took a deep breath. "Richard, look, we're worried about you. Since the surgery, you've been acting strange, trusting strangers." "Strange how? Questioning shady contracts?" "See," Sharon said, "you're being paranoid, doubting the people who love you most." Anthony, who had stayed quiet until then, spoke up. "Excuse me, but paranoia is suspecting without reason. Being wary of contracts with shell companies is just good sense." Andrew exploded. "Who are you to meddle in our family matters? I'm someone who's been through this before, and I can recognize when someone is being manipulated by those who should protect them." "Enough!" Andrew shouted. "Richard, either you send this man away, or we'll have to take more drastic measures." "What kind of measures?" Richard asked, getting up from the bed. "Measures to protect you from people taking advantage of your vulnerable state." Just then, Dr. Foster entered the room. "Mr. Thompson, I've brought the documents you requested." Andrew looked at the lawyer. "And now? Who's this?" "My attorney," Richard answered firmly. "Your attorney?" "Richard, you really are paranoid. Why do you need a lawyer?" Dr. Foster introduced himself. "I'm Dr. Gerald Foster, and I'm here because my client discovered the fraudulent guardianship petition you filed against him." Andrew was furious. "Fraudulent? We're protecting our brother." "Protecting him based on falsified medical reports?" the lawyer countered. Sharon tried to slip out of the room unnoticed, but Richard stopped her. "Sharon, stay right there. I want to hear your explanation too." "Richard, I have nothing to explain. I've always worked faithfully for you." "Faithfully? Trying to get me to sign transfers to shell companies?" Sharon began to cry. "Richard, you don't understand. The company is in financial trouble. We had to make some quick decisions." "What financial trouble?" "The company was doing just fine before my surgery." Andrew and Sharon exchanged another glance. "Richard," Andrew said, "there are some things you don't know. The company owes a lot of money." "Owes how? To whom?" "Some investments we made went bad." "What investments?" "I authorize all the company's investments." Anthony approached Richard. "Mr. Thompson, may I show him the documents?" Richard nodded. Anthony picked up a folder and showed it to Andrew and Sharon. "These are the company's bank statements from the last 6 months. They clearly show several unauthorized transfers." Andrew turned pale. "How did you get these statements?" "That doesn't matter," said Dr. Foster. "What matters is there's clear evidence of embezzlement." Sharon broke down in tears. "Richard, I can explain everything." "Then explain." We borrowed some money from the company, but it was temporary. We were going to pay it all back." "Borrowed?" Richard was incredulous. "Without my authorization." You were always too busy to discuss these matters, said Andrew. We decided to handle it ourselves. And now that I've found out, you wanted to have me declared incompetent so you could keep using the company's money. The silence confirmed Richard's suspicions. How much did you take? Andrew muttered. About 2 million. 2 million? Richard sat on the bed, feeling dizzy. Dr. Foster intervened. Mr. Thompson, I suggest we end this conversation in the presence of other lawyers. This situation could have serious legal implications. Andrew grew agitated. Legal implications? We're family. We're not going to sue each other. Maybe you should have thought of that before trying to fraudulently declare your brother incompetent, said Anthony. Sharon stood up abruptly. I'm leaving. Richard, when you snap out of this paranoia, come find me. Sharon, Richard called, you're fired, and I want all the company keys and cards back. You can't fire me. I've worked here for 15 years. Yes, I can, and I am. Sharon stormed out, slamming the door. Andrew stayed a few more minutes, trying to argue, but eventually left when he realized Richard wouldn't budge. When they were alone, Richard collapsed. Anthony, I built that company thinking I'd leave a legacy for my family, and they betrayed me in the worst way possible. I know how that feels, Mr. Thompson. The pain of family betrayal is one of the worst there is. How did you get through it? I'm not sure I ever fully did, but I learned there are good people in the world even when the ones we love most let us down. Richard looked at Anthony and Dr. Foster. The two of you barely knew me, and you've helped me more than my own family. Sometimes the family we choose is more important than blood, said Dr. Foster. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the following days, Dr. Foster worked quickly to protect Richard's assets. He managed to freeze all suspicious accounts and halt the incompetency proceedings. During this time, Anthony continued visiting Richard daily. The two men developed a genuine friendship, bonded by their shared experiences of betrayal and abandonment. Anthony, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. How did you lose your company? Anthony took a deep breath. It was the first time Richard had directly asked about his past. It was 8 years ago. I had a thriving construction business. I was married, had 2 kids. My wife handled the company's administrative side with my younger brother. What happened? I found out they'd been having an affair for years, and together they'd siphoned nearly all the company's funds into offshore accounts. Richard was shocked. Your wife and your brother? Exactly. When I confronted them, I discovered they'd planned everything. They presented fake documents proving I'd authorized the transfers. Since I trusted them completely, I never checked the papers I signed. And your children? My wife got custody of them by claiming I was emotionally unstable. It's been 5 years since I've seen my children. Richard felt a pang in his heart. Anthony, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was this bad. Don't apologize. Telling you my story helps me too, and seeing that I can prevent someone else from going through the same thing gives me purpose. But why do you work cleaning windows? With your experience, you could get something better. I tried for a few years, but the company scandal was all over the news. No one wanted to hire someone involved in a situation like that, even if I was the victim. How do you get by? With the little I earn from window cleaning and odd jobs here and there, I rent a small room nearby. It's simple, but it's mine. Richard grew thoughtful. Anthony, what do you think I should do about my brothers? That's a decision only you can make, Mr. Richard. But may I give you some advice? Of course. Don't let anger consume you like it did me. Revenge only brings more pain. But they betrayed me, and you have every right to protect yourself from them, but try to find a way that doesn't completely destroy family ties if there's still something worth saving. Richard was reflecting on Anthony's words when he got an unexpected call. Richard, it's Claire. Claire was his cousin, the daughter of his father's older brother. She was one of the few relatives he still kept in touch with occasionally. Claire, it's so good to hear your voice. Richard, I heard you had surgery. How are you? I'm doing well, thanks for asking. Richard, I need to tell you something. Your brothers came to me saying you were mentally unstable after the surgery. Richard tensed. And you believed them? At first I was worried, but they kept insisting I sign some papers as a witness to say you weren't well. That seemed odd to me. What papers? Documents to support a guardianship petition. When I refused to sign without talking to you first, they got very upset. Claire, thank you for telling me, and thank you for not signing. Richard, what's going on? Richard told Claire everything he had discovered about his brothers and Sharon's betrayal. My God, Richard, that's terrible. But how did you find all this out? A man here at the hospital helped me. If it weren't for him, I probably would have lost everything. Can I come visit you? Of course. It'd be wonderful to have some real family visit. The next day, Claire arrived at the hospital. She was a woman in her 40s, a university professor, and had always been one of the most level-headed people in the family. Richard, you look much better than I expected, she said as she entered the room. I'm recovering well. Claire, this is Anthony, the man who helped me uncover my brother's betrayal. Claire greeted Anthony warmly. Anthony, I don't know how to thank you for helping my cousin. No need to thank me, Ms. Claire, I just did what any decent person would do. Unfortunately, not everyone would, Claire said, glancing at Richard. Richard, I need to tell you something else. After I refused to sign those papers, Andrew came to me again. He offered me money to testify that you were mentally confused. He tried to bribe you? Exactly. $5,000 for me to sign a document saying you weren't well. Richard shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe my brothers would stoop that low, Anthony interjected. Mr. Richard, this shows how desperate they are. They've probably already spent most of the money they took from the company. Anthony, do you think I should talk to them? I do, but with some conditions. What conditions? With lawyers present and everything documented. They need to understand that you know everything and won't tolerate any more lies. Claire agreed. Richard, you should give them a chance to explain themselves, but take all the necessary precautions. 2 days later, Dr. Gerald Foster organized a meeting in his office. Richard had already been discharged from the hospital and was feeling much better physically. Andrew, Mark, and Charles arrived accompanied by their own lawyers. The tension in the room was palpable. Good morning, everyone, Dr. Foster began. We're here to try and resolve this family matter as civilly as possible. Andrew, the eldest, spoke first. Richard, we want you to know we never meant to hurt you. Then why did you try to have me declared incompetent with fake reports? Richard asked directly. Mark, the middle brother, spoke up. Richard, we were desperate. The company was in serious trouble and we had to make quick decisions. What trouble? The company was healthy when I entered the hospital. Charles, the youngest, finally spoke. Richard, we made some bad investments. We lost a lot of money. What investments? The three brothers exchanged glances. Andrew answered, we bet on a development company that went bankrupt. We lost nearly $2 million. And why didn't you consult me first? Because you always said no to risky investments, Mark said. Exactly for that reason, Richard exploded. Because they're risky. Dr. Foster intervened. Gentlemen, let's stay calm. Andrew, do you admit to taking company money without Richard's authorization? We admit it, Andrew said quietly. And do you admit to trying to have Richard declared incompetent with falsified documents? There was a long pause before Andrew answered. We admit that too. Richard stood up from his chair. Why, Andrew? Why would you do this to me? I gave everything for this family. I worked 20 years to build this company thinking of all of you. Andrew began to cry. Richard, we know we messed up, but we were afraid to tell you the truth. We knew you'd be furious. Furious because you lost $2 million? Richard was incredulous. You think I'd rather be betrayed and declared incompetent than hear the truth? Mark spoke up. Richard, we can pay the money back. It'll take time, but we can do it. How? You don't have $2 million saved. Charles answered, we can sell our houses, our cars. Richard looked at his three brothers. They were all crying. And Sharon? Was she involved from the start? Andrew shook his head. Sharon found out about the investments about 3 months ago. She said if we didn't include her in the scheme, she'd tell you everything. So she was blackmailing you? Exactly. That's why she was so nervous when you started questioning the contracts. Richard sat back down, feeling the weight of the situation. Do you understand this is a crime? Embezzlement? We understand, Andrew said. But we're brothers, Richard. There has to be a way to settle this as a family. Dr. Foster spoke. Richard, the decision is yours. You can press criminal charges against all of them, or try to resolve this civilly. Richard was silent for several minutes. He remembered Anthony's words about not letting anger take control. I'll give you a chance to fix this, he said finally, but with very clear conditions. What conditions? Andrew asked. First, you'll sign a document acknowledging the $2 million debt to the company. Second, you'll step away from all company management until the debt is repaid. Third, you'll sell your personal assets to start paying it back. Fourth, if you fail to meet any of these conditions, I'll press criminal charges against all of you. The brothers agreed immediately. And Sharon? Mark asked. Sharon will face criminal charges. She's not family, and on top of that, she tried to blackmail you all. After the meeting, Richard returned home for the first time in 2 weeks. It was a large mansion in an upscale Chicago neighborhood, but now it felt empty and cold to him. Anthony had offered to stay with him that first night back, worried about his friend's emotional state. How does it feel to be back? Anthony asked. Strange. This house was always my achievement, my pride. Now it just feels like a pile of empty bricks. It's normal to feel that way after everything you've been through. Anthony, can I make you an offer? Of course. I want you to come work with me at the company. Anthony was surprised. Mr. Thompson, I appreciate it, but I'm not sure it's a good idea. Why not? Because your track record with people you trust hasn't been great lately. Richard laughed for the first time in weeks. Anthony, you saved my company and my life. If I can't trust you, I can't trust anyone. But I don't have the same energy as before. I'm 60 years old and you have more experience than anyone I know. I need someone who understands both business and people. You understand both. Anthony grew thoughtful. What kind of work? Executive consulting, helping restructure the company and implement controls so nothing like this happens again. Can I think about it? Of course. But know it would be an honor to work with you. That night, the two men talked late into the evening about their lives, their losses, and their hopes for the future. Anthony, can I ask you something? Always. Do you miss your old life? I miss my children every day. The rest, not so much. I realized I had a lot of money but very little happiness. And now? Are you happy? I'm learning to be. Helping you made me feel useful again. It reminded me I can still make a difference in someone's life. You made all the difference in mine. The next day, Anthony showed up at Richard's house with his decision. I accept your offer, Mr. Thompson, but on one condition. What's that? Stop calling me Mr. We're friends now. Richard smiled and extended his hand. Deal, Anthony. Welcome to Thompson Enterprises. From that week on, Richard and Anthony began working together to restructure the company. Anthony quickly proved his competence, identifying multiple flaws in the internal controls that had allowed the embezzlement. Richard, you need to implement an internal audit system, Anthony said during a meeting. I never thought it was necessary. I always trusted family. And that's exactly why it was necessary. Trust is important, but controls are essential. Over the months, the company not only recovered from the losses caused by Richard's brothers, but began to thrive under the new management. Richard's brothers kept their word. They sold their larger homes and moved into smaller ones, using the money to start repaying their debt to the company. It was painful but necessary. Andrew was the first to reach out to Richard again. Richard, can I talk to you? Of course, Andrew. I want to apologize again, and I want you to know I've learned a lot from this. What have you learned? That trust takes years to build and seconds to lose, and that money is never worth more than family. Richard looked at his older brother. There was a sincerity in his words that hadn't been there before. Andrew, you're my brother and you always will be. What happened was serious, but it's not the end of our relationship. Thank you for giving us a second chance. Anthony taught me that holding on to bitterness only hurts the one holding it. I'd rather put my energy into rebuilding our relationship. Little by little, Mark and Charles also reconnected. Family gatherings resumed, though with a very different dynamic. There was more honesty and less superficiality in the conversations. Sharon, on the other hand, was criminally prosecuted and sentenced to 3 years in prison for embezzlement and document forgery. Richard Thompson even felt sorry for her, but understood that some lines couldn't be crossed without consequences. 6 months after the hospital incident, Richard and Anthony were in the office reviewing the company's quarterly results when Richard made an unexpected proposal. "Anthony, I want you to become a partner in the company." "What do you mean?" "I want to offer you 10% of the company. You deserve to be an owner, not just an employee." Anthony was moved. "Richard, that's very generous, but I can't accept." "Why not?" "Because your company is the result of 20 years of your hard work. I only helped for a few months." "Anthony, you saved this company. If it weren't for you, I would have lost everything. 10% is nothing compared to what you did for me." "What about your brothers? What will they think?" "I already spoke to them. They all agreed. In fact, it was Andrew's idea." Anthony was surprised. "Andrew's idea? He said you deserved to be officially recognized for what you did for the family." After much insistence, Anthony accepted the partnership. The company was renamed Thompson and Anthony Enterprises. A year later, Richard received a call that would change his life once again. "Richard, it's Brian." Brian was Anthony's eldest son, who had stopped speaking to his father after the scandal with his company. "Brian, Anthony talks about you all the time." "Richard, can I set up a meeting with you? It's about my dad." "Of course, is he okay?" "He is, but I need to talk in person." 2 days later, Brian arrived at the office. He was a young man of about 25, an engineer, and looked very much like Anthony. "Richard, first I want to thank you for everything you've done for my father." "Your father saved my life, Brian. I've done little compared to what he did for me." "That's what I wanted to talk about. For years I believed my mother's version of what happened with my father's company. And now? Now I've learned the truth. My mother and uncle really stole everything from my father and lied to me and my brother about him." Richard stayed silent, letting Brian continue. "I spent 5 years hating my father for something he didn't do. And worse, he lost everything trying to protect us." "How did you find out the truth?" "My uncle died last month and left a letter confessing everything, apologizing for what they did." Brian began to cry. "Richard, does my father know I found out?" "I don't know. He never talks about you two because it hurts too much." "I want to talk to him. I want to ask for forgiveness. Brian, your father will be so happy. You two are the most important thing in his life. Can you help me? I don't know how to bring it up." "Of course. How about you come to the office this afternoon? I'll make up an excuse to call him in." That afternoon, Richard called Anthony in for an urgent meeting. "Anthony, there's someone I want you to meet," Richard said, opening the conference room door. When Anthony saw Brian, he froze. "Brian? Dad?" Brian stood up and ran to embrace Anthony. The two men hugged, crying, while Richard quietly left the room to give them privacy. An hour later, Anthony appeared in Richard's office, his eyes red but smiling. "Richard, I don't know how to thank you." "No need to thank me, it was Brian's idea. He told me everything, about his uncle's letter, about how he learned the truth. And now I'm going to meet my 3-year-old grandson I didn't even know existed, and I'll try to make up for the 5 years I lost with my sons." In the following months, Anthony's life completely transformed. His 2 sons became part of his life again, and he discovered he was a grandfather to 2 children. Richard watched his friend's happiness with satisfaction. Seeing Anthony reunited with his family was one of the things that brought him the most joy. "Anthony, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you happy now?" "Happier than I ever imagined I could be again." "And you?" Richard thought for a few seconds. "You know, for years I thought happiness was tied to the size of a bank account or the success of a business. Now I've realized it's about the people by our side. That's true. Family isn't just who you're born with. It's who stays with you. Speaking of which, I have a proposal for you. Another one? Anthony laughed. How about we host a dinner with our whole family? Your kids, grandkids, my brothers, Claire? That would be wonderful. But where? My place. That empty mansion needs people to bring it to life. Richard, does your house even have enough space for everyone? It has 15 bedrooms, Anthony. I think we'll manage. The following Saturday, Richard's mansion was full of life for the first time in years. Brian and his brother Gabriel brought their families. Richard's brothers came with their wives and children. Claire arrived with her husband and their 2 kids. It was the first time the house had ever welcomed so many children. The sound of children's laughter echoing through the halls moved Richard deeply. Uncle Richard, your house is so big, said Melissa, Andrew's 6-year-old daughter. It is big, Melissa, but it was too empty. Now with all of you here, it feels just right. During dinner, Richard stood to make a toast. I want to thank everyone for being here today. A year and a half ago, I was alone in a hospital thinking I had no family. Now I look at all of you and see the most beautiful family in the world. To Richard, Andrew cheered, raising his glass. No, Richard said. To Anthony, who taught me that family is something we choose every day. Anthony was touched. To second chances, he said, lifting his glass. To second chances, everyone echoed. After dinner, Richard and Anthony stayed on the porch, watching the children play in the garden. Richard, can I tell you a secret? Of course. When I started cleaning windows at the hospital, I was ready to give up on everything. Life had lost all meaning. What changed? I saw you crying in that room, and I thought, this man is suffering just like I did. Maybe I can help him. Helping you saved me too. Richard was moved. Anthony, you saved my company, my family, and my life. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You already have. You gave me a new family, a new purpose, a new life. The 2 friends fell silent, watching their families together. Richard, can I ask you something? Always. If you could go back in time, would you change anything? Richard thought for a moment. I'd change how I treated my family for years. I'd change always putting the business first. But I wouldn't change meeting you. Neither would I. You know what amazes me most, Anthony? What? How 2 people who lost everything managed to help each other find it all again. Because shared losses become multiplied gains. Just then, Brian approached them. Dad, Richard, sorry to interrupt, but we wanted to thank you. Thank us for what? Richard asked. For showing us it's never too late to start over. For proving that real family is the one that accepts us despite our mistakes and helps us become better people. Gabriel, Anthony's youngest son, joined them. And for teaching us that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in who we love. Richard looked at Anthony. Seems we raised wise kids. We didn't raise them, Anthony chuckled. They raised us, taught us to be better fathers, better brothers, better people. 2 years after Richard's heart surgery, Thompson and Anthony Enterprises had become one of the most respected companies in the industry. But more important than financial success was the family-like environment Richard and Anthony had created within the company. Employees were treated like family, there was daycare for their children, comprehensive health insurance for everyone, and profit sharing based on tenure, not just job title. Richard, the annual report is here, said Anthony as he walked into the office. And? Best year in the company's history. But what makes me proudest isn't the numbers. What is it? Knowing that not a single employee faced illness alone this year. Everyone had support from the company and their colleagues. You're the one who built this culture, Anthony. No, we built it together. That afternoon, Richard received an unexpected call. Richard? It's Sharon. Richard tensed. Sharon had served her sentence and been released a few months earlier. Sharon, how did you get my number? Richard, I need to talk to you, in person. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Please, just 15 minutes. It's important. Against his better judgment, Richard agreed to meet Sharon at a cafe near the office. She looked very different, thinner, her hair graying, as if she'd aged 10 years in 2. Richard, thank you for seeing me. What do you want, Sharon? to apologize and to thank you. Thank me for not pressing criminal charges for everything I did. I know it could have been much worse. Richard studied her. There was sincerity in her words. Sharon, you worked with me for 15 years. How could you betray me like that? Sharon began to cry. Richard, I was drowning in debt. My ex-husband left a mountain of bills in my name. When I found out about your brother's embezzlement, I saw an opportunity. And you decided to blackmail me. I know it was wrong, so wrong, but I was desperate. Sharon, you could have come to me about your debts. I would have helped. I know, but I was ashamed and afraid you'd fire me for having financial troubles. Richard sighed. And now? How's your life? I'm starting over, working at a small accounting firm. The pay is low, but it's honest, and I'm slowly paying off my debts. Sharon, can I give you some advice? Of course. Honesty always pays off more than dishonesty. It might take longer, but the results last. Richard, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you forgive me? Richard was silent for a moment. Sharon, I forgive you, but that doesn't mean I trust you again. I understand. I just wanted you to know I've learned from my mistakes. I hope so, for everyone's sake. When Richard returned to the office, he told Anthony about meeting Sharon. How did you feel seeing her? Anthony asked. Pity. She threw away 15 years of work out of desperation. It's a lesson for all of us. When we're desperate, we make the worst choices. True, if she'd come to me back then, I would have helped her solve her problems. Sometimes pride keeps us from asking for help. Speaking of help, Anthony, I want to discuss an idea with you. What idea? How about creating an emergency fund for our employees, so no one has to make desperate decisions over money? That's an excellent idea. How would it work? The company would contribute a monthly percentage, and employees could also contribute voluntarily. If someone faced hardship, they could turn to the fund. Richard, that's incredibly generous. Anthony, if Sharon had an option like that, maybe she wouldn't have done what she did. Let's develop this. It could help so many families. 3 months later, the Thompson and Anthony Emergency Fund was launched. The employees' response was surprising. Almost everyone joined in, contributing not just financially, but also offering emotional support to one another. Richard, remember when you said your house felt empty? Anthony asked one evening. I do. Now your company is full of life, just like your home. It's true, and you know what amazes me the most? What? How betrayal led me to discover the true meaning of loyalty. Sometimes the worst experiences lead us to the best discoveries. By the end of that year, Richard and Anthony decided to host a company gathering at Richard's home. All employees were invited with their families. The mansion that once symbolized loneliness became the setting for one of the most joyful parties Richard had ever seen. Anthony, look at this, Richard said, pointing to the garden full of children playing. What? 2 years ago, I was crying alone in a hospital. Today, my house is filled with people who care about me and each other. And the most beautiful part is that these aren't people here out of self-interest. They genuinely care about you. How do you know that? Because when the boss gets sick and employees organize visits to the hospital, that's not obligation, that's affection. Richard was moved, remembering how the employees had arranged to visit him when he had minor surgery a few months earlier. Anthony, can I ask you a personal question? Always. Are you happy with the life we've built? Richard, when I met you, I was cleaning windows for spare change. Today, I'm a partner in a thriving company. I have my children back in my life, and I'm a present grandfather to my grandkids. How could I not be happy? And me? When you met me, I was crying alone in a hospital. Now I have a real family, a company that's more than a business. It's a community. The two friends watched the party unfold. In one corner, Richard's brothers played with their kids. In another, Anthony's children chatted with company employees. In the garden, dozens of children ran around and played together. Richard, can I share a thought with you? Of course. I think God allows us to go through certain hardships to prepare us to help others who will face the same struggles. How so? If I hadn't experienced betrayal from my own family, I wouldn't have recognized the signs of what was happening to you. And if you hadn't gone through that, you wouldn't value true loyalty the way you do. That's an interesting way to see it. And now, together, we've created an environment where others don't have to go through the same hardships we did. The emergency fund, the employee support policy, exactly. We're turning our pain into protection for others. Just then, Andrew approached them. "Richard, Anthony, mind if I interrupt?" "Of course, Andrew. I wanted to thank you both, not just for giving me a second chance, but for teaching me what real family means. Andrew, you're my brother. Family forgives and helps each other grow. Richard, what you've built here is special. This company, this gathering, this bond, it's everything a family should be." Anthony smiled. "Andrew, family isn't about sharing blood. It's about sharing life." "That's true. And you share life with so many people here." Mark and Charles joined the group. "What are you all talking about?" Mark asked. "About family," Richard replied. "Well then, you're on the right topic," Charles said. "Richard, Anthony, we want you to know you've taught us a lot about what it means to be a real man." "How so?" Anthony asked. "A real man isn't about accumulating money. It's about taking care of the people you love and being cared for by them," Mark explained. Richard looked at his brothers with pride. "You've grown so much these past 2 years." "We had good teachers," said Andrew, glancing at Richard and Anthony. As the party was winding down, Richard addressed everyone present. "Everyone, may I say a few words?" They all gathered in the main room. "I want to thank you all for being here today. A few years ago, this house was big but empty. Today it's full of life, full of love, full of family." Applause filled the room. But the most important thing isn't this house. It's what we've built together. A company that's more than just a workplace, it's a community. A family that's more than blood. It's a daily choice to care for one another. Richard looked at Anthony. "And none of this would have been possible without this man right here beside me. Anthony taught me that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in who we are to the people we love." Anthony was moved. "Richard, you've given me far more than I ever gave you. You gave me a new life, a new family, a new purpose." "No," Richard said. "We saved each other, and now together we're helping others save themselves too." The applause was long and heartfelt. Many were crying with emotion. Brian, Anthony's son, stepped up to the microphone. "Can I say something too?" "Of course, Brian. I want to speak for all the kids here today. You've taught us that it doesn't matter how many times life knocks us down. What matters is how many times we get back up and help others do the same." Gabriel, Brian's brother, added, "And you've shown us that family is who we choose to love every day, even when it's hard." Melissa, Andrew's 8-year-old daughter, came forward too. "Uncle Richard, Uncle Anthony, you make our family happier." Richard knelt to her level. "And you make our lives more colorful, Melissa." After everyone had left, Richard and Anthony stayed on the porch, as was their habit. "Richard, can I tell you a secret?" "Always. When you were in the hospital crying, I saw myself in you from years before, and I thought, if I can help this man, maybe I'm still good for something. And you did, more than you know. But what I didn't expect was that helping you would help me just as much. Anthony, do you think if I hadn't gone through that surgery, our lives would be different? Completely. You'd still be focused only on the company. I'd still be washing windows. Your brothers would still be distant and my kids still wouldn't speak to me. So, in a way, we should thank that surgery. And the courage you had to accept help from a stranger. And the generosity you had to offer it." The two friends fell silent, gazing at the stars. "Richard, what do you hope for the future?" "That our company keeps growing, but never loses this family spirit. That our children and grandchildren grow up seeing that true success is making a difference in people's lives. And you?" "That I keep being useful to the people I love. That my kids see me as proof it's always possible to start over. And that no one in our family ever feels alone in a hard moment again." "Anthony, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "Sometimes I feel like that beggar washing windows was an angel God sent to save me," Anthony laughed. If I was an angel, I'm a very human one, flaws and all. The best angels are the human ones, Anthony, the ones who choose to make a difference in each other's lives. Then we're each other's angels. Exactly. And our mission is to keep being angels for others. 5 years after that day in the hospital, Richard and Anthony were in the office reviewing the company's expansion plans when they got an unexpected visitor, a young man around 20, dressed simply and looking nervous. "Excuse me, gentlemen. My name is Derek. I work cleaning the windows at Mercy General Hospital." Richard and Anthony exchanged glances, surprised. "What can we do for you, Derek?" asked Richard. "Well, there's a man staying at the hospital. He's been crying a lot and seems to be all alone. I remembered the story everyone tells about the two of you, and I thought..." "What story?" asked Anthony. "The story about the millionaire businessman who was saved by a window cleaner who became his partner. Everyone at the hospital knows that story." Richard smiled. "And you thought you could help this man?" "Yes, but I don't know how. Could you give me some advice?" Anthony stood up and placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Derek, the first piece of advice is, sometimes a simple gesture like wiping away a tear can change an entire life. The second piece of advice," Richard added, "is that social differences don't matter. Pain is pain, and we all need compassion." "And the third piece of advice," said Anthony, "is that when we help someone, we also help ourselves." Derek nodded, taking in every word. "Do you think I should reach out to him?" "Follow your heart, Derek," said Richard. "If you feel you should help, then help." "But what if he doesn't want my help?" "You'll still have done the right thing," Anthony replied. "Sometimes, being rejected while doing good is better than being accepted while doing harm." Derek thanked them and left the office, determined. "Richard, do you think we're seeing the start of a new story like ours?" asked Anthony. "I hope so. The world needs more people willing to lend a hand to those who've fallen. And we need to always be ready to support those who have the courage to help. Anthony, what if we created a program at the company to support people who do simple jobs but have the potential to grow? How would it work? We'd offer scholarships, training, job opportunities, a way to give back to society everything we've received." "Richard, you never stop thinking of ways to help people. I learned from you, Anthony. I learned that our duty is to leave the world a little better than we found it." 6 months later, the Derek program, named in honor of the young window cleaner, had already helped 50 people. Former janitors who became technicians, former security guards who became supervisors, former waiters who became salespeople. Derek, who had helped the man at the hospital and become his friend, was the program's first beneficiary. He was studying business administration with a full scholarship paid by Thompson and Anthony Enterprises. "Richard, Anthony, can I talk to you?" Derek asked one afternoon. "Of course, Derek. How are your studies going?" "Really well, but I wanted to talk about something else. Remember the man who was crying at the hospital?" "Of course. How is he?" "He's fully recovered, and guess what?" "What?" "He offered me a job at his company, but I turned it down." "You turned it down? Why?" asked Anthony, surprised. "Because I want to stay here. You gave me a chance when no one else believed in me. I want to repay that by helping others the way you helped me." Richard was moved. "Derek, you've perfectly understood the spirit of our company. You taught me that success isn't about climbing alone. It's about helping others climb with you." "Exactly," said Anthony. "And the more people we help rise, the higher we can all go." That evening, Richard was at home making dinner. He'd learned to cook in recent years when he got a call from Claire. "Richard, I have some news to share." "What news?" "I'm going to write a book about your and Anthony's story." "A book? Why?" "Because it's a story that needs to be told. A story about second chances, about forgiveness, about how two people can save each other." "Claire, our story isn't all that special." "Oh, but it is, Richard. That's special, because it shows that no matter how many times life knocks us down, we can always start over if we have the right people by our side." "And what will you call the book?" "The Beggar Who Wiped the Millionaire's Tears." "That's a good title." "Richard, may I interview you and Anthony for the book?" "Of course, but on one condition. What's that? Part of the book's profits will go to the Derek program. Deal. 6 months later, the book was published and became a bestseller. The story of Richard and Anthony inspired thousands of people across the United States. They received letters from people who had reconciled with their families after reading the book, from those who had helped strangers in need, and from those who had learned to value human relationships over money. Richard, did you ever imagine our story could inspire so many people? Anthony asked, reading a letter from a reader. Never. But I'm glad our pain has turned into hope for others. That's the cycle of life. We receive pain, turn it into wisdom, and offer that wisdom to those who need it. Anthony, may I ask you something I've always wanted to ask? Always. That first day at the hospital when you saw me crying, what went through your mind? I thought, this man is suffering just as I did. If someone had reached out to me back then, maybe my story would have been different. I can be for him what I wish someone had been for me. And when I accepted your help, I thought, maybe there's still hope for me too. Anthony, you saved my life that day, and you saved mine. We were both broken, each in our own way, and we fixed each other. 10 years after that meeting at the hospital, Richard and Anthony were organizing the 10th anniversary celebration of Thompson and Anthony Enterprises. The company had grown exponentially, but kept its family-centered essence. Richard, do you remember how it all began? Anthony asked as they prepared their speech for the party. How could I forget? You wiping my tears with a damp cloth. And look where we are now. We've reached where we needed to be, not just financial success, but human success. The party took place at Richard's mansion, now officially called the Thompson and Anthony Family House. It was where all company gatherings, employee weddings, and children's birthdays were held. During the celebration, Richard gave an emotional speech. Friends, family, fellow travelers. 10 years ago, two very different people met in a moment of pain. A successful but lonely businessman and a simple but generous man. He looked at Anthony. Today, those two have built far more than a company. They've built a family, a community, a support network that extends to hundreds of people. Anthony stepped up to the microphone. Richard said we were different, but in truth we were very much alike. We were two men who needed to learn that true wealth isn't in what we accumulate, but in what we share. The applause was long and heartfelt. Brian, Anthony's son, now 28, and the company's HR director stepped forward. Dad, Richard, we want to thank you for teaching us that family isn't about who's known us the longest. It's about who chooses to stand by us in our hardest moments. Melissa, Andrew's daughter, now a 15-year-old, added, Uncle Richard, Uncle Anthony, you've shown us that it doesn't matter how many times we fall. What matters is how many times we get up and help others do the same. Derek, now a business graduate and the company's social projects manager, concluded, You two proved that a simple gesture can change the world. All it takes is the courage to reach out to those in need. When everyone had left, Richard and Anthony stayed on the porch as they always did at the end of gatherings. Anthony, if someone asked you what the best moment of your life was, what would you say? The moment I decided to step away from my own pain to take care of yours. And you? The moment I accepted help from a stranger and realized I wasn't alone in this world. Richard, do you think we deserved everything we've achieved? I think we did because we learned to share. Those who hoard happiness for themselves end up losing it. Those who share multiply it. That's true. And the most beautiful part is seeing our story repeat itself through the people we've helped. How so? Derek helped that older man at the hospital. The man offered Derek a job. Derek turned it down to stay here and help others. It's an endless cycle of kindness. Anthony, can I confess something to you? Always. Sometimes I'm afraid this is all a dream, and I'll wake up alone in that hospital room again. Richard, this isn't a dream. It's the result of choosing love over fear, unity over loneliness, generosity over selfishness. And if we could go back, would you do it all the same? I'd do it all the same. Even the mistakes, because they brought me to you. Anthony, you're my chosen brother, my partner in heart, my soul's friend. And you're my second chance, my proof that God exists, my certainty that being good is worth it. The two friends gazed at the stars, just as they had 10 years earlier. Richard, what do you hope for in the next 10 years? That we keep being instruments of change in people's lives, that our story keeps inspiring others to help one another, and that we never forget who we are today because we chose to care for each other. Amen to that, said Anthony. And may we keep proving that love has no age, family has no blood, and wealth has no price. Richard stood up and hugged Anthony. Thank you for wiping my tears that day. Thank you for letting me wipe them. Thank you for trusting me when you had no reason to. Thank you for staying when everyone else left. Thank you for staying too. And so, under a starry sky, two men who had found each other in pain and built a life of joy together renewed their promise never to let the other feel alone again. Their tears from 10 years ago had turned into smiles. Their loneliness had become family. Their pain had become purpose. And the damp cloth that started it all had become a symbol that sometimes the simplest gesture can begin the most beautiful story. The end. Now tell us, what did you think of this story of friendship and new beginnings? Have you ever been in a situation where someone helped you when you needed it most? Share your experiences in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories.